Okay, let me start again. I'm Sylvia Oberly. I'm a member of the planning team here at Knollwood Baptist Church. We have some wonderful guests with us today, and I will introduce them in just a few minutes. But as we start, I want to remind you of a few housekeeping matters. First, we do record each of our sessions once I remember to hit the button so that we can share with others not able to attend. And to ensure the best quality reporting, we ask that you keep your audio on mute throughout our initial presentations. As you have questions, please put them in the chat function, and we will be checking on those and will address them during our question and answer session at the end. Our recordings and other information are posted on our Faith in the City Facebook page and on our church website. Information about joining our Facebook group is also available in the chat. Again, welcome to our discussion today. Throughout this year, our focus has been on building community will for equitable schools now. We strive not only to share information about important work underway in our community, but also to encourage more people to get involved through action and advocacy. Our topic today is violence prevention is an equity issue. And coming off a year in which Winston-Salem and Forsyth County saw a 50% increase in homicides and other violent crime, a year in which there were more shootings involving young people in their teens, a year that saw more guns in schools and a fatal shooting in the fall, we believe this discussion is now more important than ever. So our goal today is to explore violence as an issue of equity, with the interconnections between communities and schools, and with the recognition that underlying it all are systemic issues of racism and inequity. And to learn from those working so hard in this area how we can better support the work that many of them have been doing at the grassroots level for some time. We are pleased to have as our guest moderator today an individual who for the past 2 decades has been deeply involved in studying and addressing crime and violence from a systemic perspective. Alvin Atkinson is the Director of Strategic Initiatives and Assistant Director at the Center for the Study of Economic Mobility at Winston-Salem State. He's a nationally recognized expert in community-based violence prevention and was previously the Director of the Center for Community Safety at Winston-Salem State, where he led community partners in addressing youth and gun violence. He will provide the current context for our discussion and also further introduce our other guests, Misha James, Nikita McDaniel, David Villada, and Efriwan Muhammad. So please join me in welcoming all of our guests today. And Alvin, I will turn it over to you now.
Well, thank you, Sylvia. Those words were something you said to me back in 2005 when you left the Center for Community Safety, and I moved into your shoes. And I've sort of been trying to follow in your shoes for a number of years now. But I do appreciate this opportunity to come before you and to really bring something that really has not gone away in our community, and that is this desire for us to be better than what we have been before. This desire really resonated with us in our community back in the late 1990s when through our U.S. Attorney, Walter Holton, and others in our law enforcement and community really saw Winston-Salem as a place in which we could come together to really address issues that have really just separated us on so many different levels. At that time, we really looked at violence as the focus, because we said then, as we do now, that you cannot think about anything that you want to do unless you feel safe. And if you don't feel safe, you can't read, you don't want to eat, you don't want to do any of those things. And that desire, that knowledge for us really prompted us in 2001 with the creation of the Center for Community Safety to begin saying, how do we bring partners together to address this violence? The trouble was for us was that you couldn't really isolate violence. You can't really separate it out from all the other challenges that our communities and citizens face. And so while we made progress, and we had a number of programs that were put in place, I'll call out the Street Workers Program, I'll call out Project Fresh Start, I'll call out Weed and Seed, Project Safe Neighborhoods, Youth Crime Watch. All of these things were set on helping us to address violence, knowing though that in doing so, we will really be impacting other issues in our community, such as quality education, such as housing, such as jobs. Well, we were doing pretty well. Now, here it is, 2021. We have taken our eyes off of this issue. And unfortunately, the pandemic has opened our eyes to the fact that we have not kept the will to make those improvements sustainable. And not that it was going to be easy, because it's not. These things are so interconnected, and that we cannot really just focus on one and think that we're solving it for every other issue. And so I don't want to really say much more than we have to get ourselves together now. The most important time for us is now. All that's happened in the past has really brought us to a point to where we cannot allow this opportunity to pass us, because those of us who are on this call, we won't be here in the next 20 years. At least some of us will, but many of us won't be here. But those issues, if we don't take action now, we don't want our young to begin doing this and having this kind of meeting again. Now, I told the presenters, those on the panel, that today I'm actually in the National Civil Rights Museum here in Memphis, Tennessee, sitting in a room next to the Lorraine Hotel, which is the site, looking at what they've done, and the whole image of Martin Luther King is just permeating all through me, and knowing that his birthday is right around the corner. I am so fired up to be here to share with you these individuals who will come and tell you how they've been on that front line, how they're working, and they need you to be a part of this effort to make this different, to make our city the best city it can be. And it starts one person at a time. And so without me going further, I will go and lift up for you our first presenter, Misha James. And Misha is going to talk about her work and what she does and how she knows that violence is an equity issue. And we'll hear her, and then we'll go through the rest of the panelists so that they can share a few words. And then we're going to give you a chance to answer some questions at the end and find out what you can do to be a part of this. So Misha, take us away and let us hear about your work in this space.
Thank you so much. And let me say, I pray I'm going to be here in the next 20 years. I just turned 40 and I beat COVID, so I need another 20 at least. Thank you all for having me. Thank you for this invitation. I have 5 to 7 minutes and I am going to read, so I make sure I stay within that time frame. I am Misha James of Makai'sMom.com blog, and also the hostess of Our Kijiji, where Kijiji stands for Village in Swahili. So I've used social media for a while. We left a charter school, my son and I am going to speak from the parental perspective of a high school senior at Mount Tabor High School. We left the charter school in the 4th grade after learning their effects on public school funding, and then witnessing what was happening in the public schools my son attended. I had to use my voice to make others aware of the options to do things outside of school. I was pushed by my village to put my own voice on its platform. So I began writing a blog in December 2019, and then Kelly Easton, who's the ED of Action for Equity, offered me the opportunity to stretch my level of comfort by being in front of the camera and host the Our Kijiji blog every Saturday. I've been doing that since April 2021. My goal has always been to talk about things that many don't openly discuss, but will still experience, such as mental health, parenting trials, since there is no handbook to parenting, racism, equity, etc. Not all have welcomed, wanted, or liked my voice, so I continue doing it for those who do. Now, here's an oxymoron for you as to how I see connections between community and school violence. I was not surprised as to what happened on September 1st at Mount Tabor, because what do we expect from those who lack social emotional intelligence, those who live traumatic lives, and who were also home for about 18 months? What do we expect them to do? At the same time, I was surprised when my son and his friends said they were not surprised, based on the history of those involved, of a teen being shot or murdered. Their issue was they were shot or murdered at school. We've lost the village mentality where students fear their educators just as they fear their parents. There are a number of reasons why this has happened, but a couple of them are educators don't have the resources they need to survive as humans, much less take on the task of helping to raise a classroom full of children. Many of them also lack the emotional intelligence and or capacity to handle what these children walk through the doors with. Those experiences are part of the college curriculum the educators experience. I'm specifically working with parents. Due to poor experiences, PTAs aren't quite my ministry, so I help the kids and parents my son played football with, those who accept the various offers I speak of in the community. The blog platform includes viewers, many of whom are parents, and once a month I try to host my son and his friends, where they've mentioned more than once that while they are teens, they have things to say and should not only be heard, but they should also be listened to. They've asked to not be discounted just because their age is that of a minor, and I agree. This is an equity issue because we have got to stop making every decision for people based on what makes us comfortable and include the young people. As I hear those words, it applies to the Black community. Include us on the decisions you make about us. Ask the disenfranchised what's needed and be willing to be uncomfortable and sacrifice a little to make sure things are equitable. What things need to happen or efforts that need to happen at a much greater sustainable levels, you ask? A few things I've said a couple times on other platforms that I'll reiterate here. September 1st was not a school shooting. It was a shooting that happened at a school. I'll also emphasize, since we're hosted by a place of worship, we must continue to do more than pray. Pray and. If there was a silver lining in the situation that happened, it's because it happened at a predominantly white school and it woke some white folks up and some oblivious Black folks up to what's been going on. It shook some people, and that fear has brought some knee-jerk reactions I'm not particularly fond of, such as increased law enforcement presence, particularly because the students were surveyed and that's not what they wanted. It goes back to not discounting children just because they're minors. They're talking and saying a lot, but are we listening? Diversity, meaning not just hiring or including white women to check the diversity box, but hiring and including people of color who are just, if not more, educated and experienced. Equity, meaning making sure people start from a place that's applicable to where they currently are. And inclusion, making sure people are included and decisions made about them and paid what they should be paid and not what you think they should be paid, and that they should be grateful enough to earn. DEI ain't a buzzword for many of us, it's real life. It can determine whether I'm able to keep up with these student loan payments that will return in May, that I've been paying on for years, but have made a minute dent in, but that's a whole other issue. Lastly, we no longer need white allies. We need white accomplices. We need white people's money, time, voices, and willingness to sacrifice losing Facebook friends, invitations to the barbecue and promotions, because we risk it every day. Thank you.
Wow, what a start. Misha, I see why you are a blogger of value to this community. You've laid it out in a way that tells your story and what you have been doing and how this community can join you in making a difference. Wonderful. It also now gives us an opportunity to hear from another panelist who also has a story. Ms. Nikita McDaniel, who many of you know, will now share her voice to this space.
Hey everyone, I'd like to thank you just for being here. It's not that often when I get invited to speak on panels such as this about an issue that is very near and dear to my heart. When I'm asked to introduce myself, I always kind of don't really know where to start, but here I'm going to start from a place. I'm gonna give a little bit of context because I'm gonna bring us home in the end of my 7 minutes. But I started doing community-based work from a grassroots level over 10 years ago with an organization called Neighbors for Better Neighborhoods. I'm pretty sure many of you have heard of Neighbors for Better Neighborhoods that teaches a model of organizing called asset-based community development. And as I worked as the lead organizer, I kind of became frustrated by having to get up and go into communities the next day where there was still blood on the ground where someone had been killed from the night before. And I felt defeated in the work that I did. I was not an issue-based organizer. My job was to identify folks in community and to help to get them equipped to be able to fight whatever it was that they felt like was important in their community. But I definitely felt like we were feeling that gun violence in our communities. And my job that I loved became very depressing. And I didn't have an outlet to really fight gun violence at that time. So I ran into a beautiful lady named Sarah Green, who was a part of an organization called Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. And that really is where I found my voice and my power to be able to affect gun violence on a national level, but also on a local level. And that volunteer opportunity turned into a position where I got to manage volunteers and help volunteers across the country to fight gun violence on a state and local level. All of that is important because that moved me to a place where for the last 6 years, I kind of been away from my community and kind of a little bit detached. Looking at things, but kind of frustrated because I'm just going to be honest. It was the same old song here in Winston, and I got frustrated with it. So I was like, I can just stay in my home and do my job. But I got a call from somebody that I respected. Artemis Peterson, many of you may know him as Papa. He is one of the founders of Enough is Enough. Called me this spring and was very concerned about the gun violence in the city and felt like if the women came together and started working, then maybe we could see a difference and maybe we could motivate the men and maybe we could shake up some limbs. So I was like, maybe I should take that opportunity to do that. And so that formed back in May, the Women's Gun Violence Prevention Coalition, which is a group of women from all across the spectrum here in Winston-Salem, mostly Black women who have been impacted in some way or another by gun violence. And we decided we were going to support the efforts of the grassroots groups that are doing the work. And that meant that we would have to fight and advocate for some policy changes. That meant that we would have to fight and advocate for funding. Just like Ms. Misha said earlier, you know, like the folks that are doing this work, they are experts and they should be paid for it. So we just began to strategize around doing that work. And it's been remarkable work. I want to point out that like the key to solving any social problem is really to organize people who share a common concern and that are willing to share their gifts to be able to address that problem. And that's what we see with the Women's Gun Violence Prevention Coalition. And our goal is to help to support the work of the grassroots groups that are doing the work on the ground every day. And our goal is also to be able to create a comprehensive solution to end gun violence. And when I say that, this is where I want everybody to be listening, because all of us are a piece of that solution. We need some evidence-based practices. We have some on the table to discuss. We know that there are many groups that have been doing work around gun violence prevention, but we need a coordinated effort to be able to make that happen. So part of what we have taken on is to bring all of the stakeholders to the table so we can learn what everybody is doing, so that we can make sure that we really do end gun violence by using evidence-based practices to do that. With regards to community violence, I will say this, community violence is school violence. And the reason why I say that is because community violence spills over into the school, right? It spills over. So it is a type of school violence. It is a type of school violence that if we don't address it, that it can potentially get worse. So I'm happy that I live in a community that is aware of that and that is focusing their energy on helping the grassroots groups to be able to end the violence within the schools by working with our students and staff within the schools. But we just know that like it's an important approach. And it reminds me of the work that Action for Equity is doing. And I am wholeheartedly into this work and bought into it. It's the whole school, whole community, whole child. We have to address community violence, not just at school. We have to do it in the communities as well. So it is very important that our mentors are working in the schools and that they're working in the communities and that they have a broad reach, not just around the child. We have to make sure that we are supporting the parents, the grandmas, the aunties, the next door neighbors who don't have children, because the community fabric at the end of the day is what really matters. And we have to make sure that we have all the tools, the social and emotional training. And honestly, I'm going to just use my Karen voice and say we need love. And nobody can love on us like we can. So I think that's a huge piece of it. And then finally, I'll just add this about, how do I see, gun violence as a equity issue? It's kind of, I'm not going to say it's obvious, but what I will say is we live in a country where Black Americans are disproportionately impacted by gun violence. And we actually experience 10 times the gun homicides and 18 times the gun assault injuries, which is nearly 3 times the amount of whites in America. So you can't say that there's not a disparity, right? We have to work on it and make sure that there are equitable solutions and that we focus some of our energy on it. The good thing is that I believe our community is headed in the right direction, and that we have elected officials, we have our foundations, we have the grassroots community, which is more organized than I've ever seen in my career here as an organizer. That are stepping up to the plate to actually do something. However, the lack of funding and the lack of support there will actually cause us a problem, right? So we always say, well, what can we do besides money? Y'all tell me, what have we done without money? So I believe that redirecting the fund, I see our foundations looking at redirecting some of their funding to address this issue. Our nonprofits are going to have to look at things like that. Our city and county elected officials are going to have to do things like that. And then we're going to have to be able to come to the table. So when everybody out here who's a part of an institution creates a table, they expect for community to come, right? So why is it that when community creates a table, that there's resistance from some to come to the table? We said that we wanted everyone at the table. If you are impacted or working with gun violence and looking for solutions, come to the community table. It is such a great table. There is so much knowledge there. I can hardly stand it every Tuesday when we meet. So that is what we're going to continue to do. We support, we're thankful for all of the support that we have gotten, but that's what you can do, is come to the table and urge your colleagues and friends to come to the table.
Wow. I know folks are putting comments in the chat, and you all so far have just put it out there for this, or at least you who are on this call, this meeting, to hear. But we know we have to get this message out beyond this Zoom event. And so far, look, I'm ready. Even from Memphis, Tennessee, I'm ready to go to work, get back to work. But let's go on and hear now from Brother Ifragwan Muhammad, who will share his story with us.
Greetings. First of all, let me say it's an honor and a pleasure to be invited to this discussion today by Faith in the City and Brother Alvin Atkins. And so I'm deeply humbled. Just quickly, of course, I am Brother Ifragwan Muhammad. I wear many hats in the community. Today, I'm actually wearing the hat as the facilitator of an initiative called the 10,000 Fearless. This initiative was born out of a call on the 20th anniversary of the historic Million Man March, a call to come back into our community from that gathering to make our community a safe and decent place to live. And in order to do that, we wanted to set up conflict resolution centers to mediate some of the senseless beefs or conflicts that lead to some of the gun violence and the bloodshed in our community. So we began the initiative in 2015, and we began to basically, with no financial support, but just love. And that was our motivation, going to different communities throughout Winston-Salem and Forsyth County, engaging our community, right? As a part of our efforts, we were invited in 2016 to be a part of a discussion on law enforcement and gun violence conducted by Congresswoman Alma Adams at that time. And from there, we continue to work underground, if you will. A lot of times people don't understand grassroots. They hear the term, but when we really think about what grassroots is, the roots are in the dirt underneath the soil. The roots are pulling from the nutrients in the soil to feed the stem so that you and us, we see the beautiful flowers, but the roots are very, very important. And so we are humbled that you have chosen to bring the roots up to get a little sunlight today. But since then, we went into neighborhoods just to have a conversation with neighbors and residents of neighborhoods that have been impacted by so many challenges. And so we continued our efforts, just working, going into various communities, door to door, street by street, block by block. Because one of the things is that in community, you know, we have neighborhoods, we have hoods, but the neighbor has been taken out of the hood. So this effort, we believe it is a divine call, right? To bring back community, to show community that we can hold ourselves accountable and put back the neighbor in neighborhood. And so we worked quietly over the last several years, going into various neighborhoods throughout Winston-Salem. And of course, like so many things, when the pandemic happened, we had to come back in. And as we came back in, of course, at that time, we didn't stop working because the violence and the crime and the despair and the hopelessness didn't stop. It actually increased. And so one of the things that we did during that time, I think it was back in 2020, with my brother who's going to speak, is that Brother David Velada of Enough is Enough reached out to myself and others after a group of young men on the South Side who are part of Hispanic street organizations. We don't call them gangs because gangs have a negative connotation. We call them street organizations, right? Because the gang is a family. But these young men wanted to reach out to see what they could do to squash the situation. And so during the pandemic, we were working quietly behind the scenes to initiate a peace and a truce between certain members of the Hispanic community. But of course, after we got a little bit better understanding of how to maneuver during this pandemic, we, of course, like the rest of the community, saw the numbers escalating in terms of the gun violence in our community, specifically with our youth. And so we said, we can no longer wait, sit back in our homes. We have to go out back into the community. So around May of 2021, we relaunched our 10,000 Fearless Initiative. And the 10,000 Fearless Initiative seeks to work with members of the community who want to do something, but don't know how to do it. So a part of our initiative is that every Saturday we offer training in conflict resolution, basic first step, self-defense, threat assessments, and the most important thing is how to engage brothers and sisters in the community where they live. And we know that the most impactful thing that we can do is have community involved with community. Because whereas community may not trust law enforcement for various historical reasons and current reasons, community talks to community, right? So when we're out in the community, we notice that when we're there and we have an organized presence, it literally lowers the temperature, because we're talking with grandmothers, we're talking with aunties, uncles, we're talking to some of the young men who are involved in sliding or stepping, involved in some of the violent behavior. And they will tell you what it is they need and what it is they want. And they're not bad. They've just been put in bad situations. And so while we're out there in real time, we've noticed that the community says how wonderful it is to see people who look like them, ordinary members of the community, showing up and knocking on their doors, checking on our elderly to see how they're doing, talking with our young people to see, how they're doing. And so this effort we've continued since we relaunched with the support of wonderful individuals who are on this panel discussion. My sister Nakia McDaniels has always supported us. Brother David, he's been out with us, and Sister Mika, who's with the Women's Gun Violence Prevention Coalition. And so when we're out in the community, along with the conflict resolution and the mediation, we develop what's called a Keep the Peace hotline. And the Keep the Peace hotline doesn't involve any law enforcement. It's purely confidential. So if they're members of the community that have conflicts or beefs, when they reach out to us, we get that information and we see if we can, rectify whatever the situation is before it spreads to gun violence. And we get calls like 24/7. It could be a call at 5 p.m. on a Tuesday. It could be 1 a.m. on a Saturday morning. And so we've been doing this not with limited resources, purely out of love. And while we're out there, we have literally prevented, situations involving weapons. We've actually gotten individuals who had weapons drawn to holster those weapons. And so we know that this definitely works, but like anything, you have to be able to have the resources to grow the capacity. So, I just wanted to use my 5 or 6 minutes just to share a little bit about our efforts. And I do want to add this. I think that when people find out about what we're doing, they're surprised. And the reason why they're surprised is because in our community, when we hear about crime and violence, we normally look at it through a public safety lens. And so when you talk about addressing crime and violence through a public safety lens, we immediately think about what can law enforcement do. But we have to see this as a public health issue. And we have to be innovative and creative and see that this is an initiative that is preventative and it uses trusted members of the community. And when we look at violence, it's not just gun violence. It's the violence of a child going to bed at night with no food. It's the violence of a mother who doesn't know if she's going to have a place to stay in the next few days. It's the violence of children going to underfunded schools where teachers are tired and underpaid. I think we have to look at violence from a broad perspective and then go in and offer hope and opportunity to replace the despair and the hopelessness that is the mother of violence.
Wow. Brother Muhammad just hit on why when we worked with the Center for Community Safety, it wasn't about just violence. It wasn't about crime. It was holistic. It was about all that he just described. And that's why we today still have to continue addressing violence from this holistic perspective. Thank you, Brother Muhammad. Our last presenter, I actually met several years ago when he was beating up bad habits. And he's still beating up those bad habits through his new organization, New Life, New Vida. David Bellata.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. I want to take this moment, especially to thank the Norwood Baptist Church, my colleagues and the rest of the panelists, everybody watching us. But most of all, thanks to God Almighty, our Father and Savior, my shepherd and my creator, who still has me here. Serving and doing what I do. I had a heavy heart today. I've done this plenty of times and I don't know what to speak about. I'm full of emotions, pain, and rage right now. We talk about equity. Equity just means numbers and dollars. You know, and I'm gonna touch back on that, but thank you, brother. As you said, I'm David Villada, New Life, New Vida's founder and director. I'm also the director of Beating Up Bad Habits, which is a mentoring program in our community where we take kids off the streets and put them into a safe haven, teach them the art of boxing. We also do music. We do soccer. With my brother Efren Guam Muhammad, we do a lot of different things in the streets. For years, since 2009, I've been doing community service and I've been seeing and dealing with these young kids, these young men involved in gangs or broken homes. Let's talk about those numbers. Let's talk about that equity, especially in our Hispanic community. When our parents, these people migrate here and try to come here for a better life and perspective, and every day they're looked at as illegals. When they got to drive and they got to do things as illegal. These kids are raised in poverty and pain and suffering. They go to schools because it's the rule. They wake up every morning and go do things that they got to do, but they don't understand that their parents, their families, their community is lacking rights, is lacking services, is lacking resources, that there really is no civil order. But we have all these millions and millions of dollars coming into the city, been coming into the city for so long. We see a lot of prosperity, we see a lot of building, we see a lot of equity. But then we see these numbers, this death, this crime become a norm amongst our community, amongst our children, amongst our kids. But then we're asking for help, and what are we willing to do? I myself, with my organization, since 2013, that's when I started BUBH, Beating Up Bad Habits. 2015 is when I started New Life, New Vida. Because more and more I got involved and I seen these kids come and go through my program, through my hands, and end up either dead or in jail. So it's not just them or the victim, but it's the families as well that they leave behind, the siblings, the parents, the stuff that everybody goes through, but nobody really remembers because they're not in their household no more. It's just a number, it's just a dollar, because crime pays. Everywhere you go, crime pays from the bottom, from you get a ticket to all the time you get arrested and everything all up the ladder. You know, the judicial system is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And it starts with their police officers and policing in our streets, in our communities. And that's the biggest gang that we fight every day. Equity, numbers and dollars again. They got 7 million or some change in a budget to fight our streets, to fight our crime. But now here we go, 29 murders in 1 year, spike all the way to 44 in the city and 50 in the county. But here we are, the grassroots organizations. Here are the people who are in the streets interrupting violence, doing the work that God does, that God sent us to do. And we're looked upon, we're belittled, not given the resources nor the money that we need. How can we save our people? How can we provide for our people if we don't have that? So It's blessings, it's God's blessings. Because God is the one who really turns out the numbers, like us right here, right now, coming together, and we should keep together. And I thank Sister Nikita and Papa Kelly for building and Brother Effigon and all the Women Coalition Against Gun Violence. Because honestly, like it says right behind me, enough is enough. It's time for new life. That's what we stand for. That's what we're pushing. And thanks to the school board and Trisha McManus, now not only are we fighting in our schools and in the homes and in the streets, but all everywhere where we can find a troubled kid, a hungry kid, a kid who's misunderstood, because these teachers and these other people, all they do is go teach and learn and get back and live their life, but don't understand the cultural competency. They don't understand these individuals they're working with, they're teaching. These kids are misunderstood and judged because they're in pain, because lack of parenting, for lack of resources. Some of them are hungry because when they walk outside the streets on the way to school, they got to see drive-bys and they got to see murders. And that becomes a norm. No kid, no individual should ever feel that murder and death is okay. But let's talk about equity and numbers and money. Where is it? The federal government has passed down so many millions of dollars amongst the state, the city, and the county. And these people who are responsible for this money and allocate this money, what are they ready to do for it now that this numbers has spiked? That these murders are in these streets. And let me remind everybody, thanks to Brother Effigon Muhammad, Papa, myself, Sister Nikita, American More Bonding, AAU Bail Bonds, EOS, Equal Opportunity Staffing, we all came together and we sat and mediated and facilitated a Hispanic peace treaty amongst all the Sureño gangs 16 months ago. 16 months ago, they stopped the killing, they stopped the murders amongst the south side of Winston-Salem and throughout the city of Winston-Salem. Just a month ago, we had 2 murders in our community, in our Hispanic community, a 15 and a 19-year-old, 20-year-old. But before that, they went 15 months without shootouts, without homicides accredited to the Sureño gangs. And we did that, the people, the community, we did that without help, without resources. So if we can do that, what else can we do for the rest of the city and for our schools? Should equity really be a problem? Should numbers and money really be an effort to say no or who or where or when? Put the money where it belongs, in the streets with the people, in the communities, provide services, help grassroots organizations to say no more. Enough is enough. It's time for a new life. We're all here on this panel, on this conversation for a reason. Let's stand up for real, and ask for what's right, for what's for the people.
Thank you, David. Wow, spoken from the heart. Just so thankful for all of you who have joined and for those who have said their piece, have put out there. And I know we're going to have some minutes where Sylvia will guide us through perhaps some questions and comments about how we can actually take action. But one thing I want to leave with you is we talked about love, the love being that common denominator for us to do this work. Well, I have someone who has told me that love acrostically is simply living in order of victory eternally. And if we can keep love in front of us, we can indeed live our lives eternally. So Sylvia, I turn it to you to get us through. And I know there were a lot of comments in the chat. I know this has been recorded. So hopefully those are, I know I'll have to go back and see the chats because there's just so much in there, but you can take it from here. And I thank all of you for joining us. But Sylvia.
Well, thank you, Alvin. And I have to say that I'm almost speechless. And such sobering, encouraging, inspiring words from all of you. Thank you so much for really providing information that I have to say, I'm sure many people on this call are hearing for the first time or learning about in detail for the first time. So we've had several questions that have that have come up. And one of the ones that I would just ask to start off, I know, Misha, your comments about not just being allies, but accomplices. And others of you have talked about funding and really getting a new direction and a new sense of a table, a community table. Would love to hear a little bit more about how we change that attitude, particularly among white people in the community, people who are not living in communities that you are discussing, how we change from being an ally to an accomplice, how we really do that. I'd love to hear from some of you. Misha, would you want to start with you? You're the one who brought that up. How do we change from that? And any others of you?
Sure, and I will not take credit for that. That's actually a quote from one of the guests I had on the blog very early on, who said that we need to switch from being allies to accomplices. And in my opinion, what that looks like is not so much behind closed doors. Yes, we appreciate the funding, but kind of putting the slogan of putting your money where your mouth is. So that means when we're out in the community, you show up with us. When we're out at the schools, you show up with us. When we have conflict, you show up on our behalf to help us fight that fight. Many white people are at their schools. They are on PTA boards, but they show up in different spaces, doing different things. When we talk about our kids needing, social emotional help, when we talk about advocate for the educators to get social emotional learning help, we need you to show up in those spaces and advocate for that as well. We just don't need the money to say, okay, I'll write a check. That's wonderful and needed. However, we need the man and the woman power as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
May I add what to Sister Mika? I think it was stated early on that, what contributes to the violence and the crime in our community are systemic issues. And I think it was mentioned racism. But there's another ism, and that's classism. Oftentimes, those who have been brought to the table are normally the elite Black class that many of our institutions in this city are accustomed to dealing with. And so grassroots are often never brought to the table. And unfortunately, this is why we keep going around and around, because the people who are actually on the ground, in the dirt, are never brought there. And so I think we have to recognize that, and classism has to be destroyed as well. The Winston-Salem Journal on this Saturday, I believe January the 8th, did an expose on the end of the year violence. And we had our public officials, our law enforcement officials, and community officials. But if you notice in that article, you never had anyone from the grassroots to say one word. Why is that? Not just racism, but classism. And I think we also cannot no longer use the excuse that, well, grassroots, of course we need infrastructure and organization, but we can't use the excuse that they can't handle money, right? Mm-hmm. Because we just had a perfect example of one of our biggest institutions that made a very significant miscalculation. So I don't think funding grassroots should ever be questioned in terms of handling resources. I think that this is an opportunity that Winston-Salem and Forsyth County has. And if we miss this opportunity, we'll never give it back again. Because as we see, our city and this country, because of the pandemic and other things, are literally unraveling. In that same article I mentioned, our chief of police and law enforcement were very explicit to say that they don't have the man and woman power in terms of recruiting law enforcement. And it's not just a case of funding. So I think community initiatives where community members who are trusted, who are doing this work, if they are sincerely backed and allowed to do what it is we do, I think we can save some lives and change some of these dismal numbers that Brother David mentioned. 50 deaths in the county, 44 in the city, and the overwhelming majority of those were young Black men. Mm-hmm. And so we are feeling the pain because each of those numbers represent family members. They represent friends. They represent whole communities. And we have an opportunity going into 2022. We can either remain in the darkness or we can choose to go into the light of a new day. And I'll say this, since we are faith community, faith without works is dead.
Amen.
But work is a mathematical formula. Work is force times distance. So the force is that we have to be rooted in God for God to move us the distance that where we want to be. So I thank you for this opportunity.
Man, can I answer that question that you said, brother? That why we're not invited to those meetings with those stakeholders and those people? Can I answer that right quick, people?
Certainly.
Okay. You know why? Because the truth hurts. And the people who's in the streets and the people who see these families and know these individuals who are dying, who are getting shot, who end up in jail, especially me, like a bail bondsman. I'm in the community. I see it all. I hear it all as an activist. So when I go downtown and I relate to these people, I sit with these other individuals, like you mentioned, Brother F. and Guam, and I tell them from the heart, like I did today, and like I will continue to do every day in my life. The truth hurts, and they can't take the truth. Because truth, what it does is raises questions and eyebrows, and people start asking questions and looking at each other. And it's like, why haven't so many people been in position for so many years? Not to state no names or nothing, but this city is a mess. And you guys been in position for too long, and the truth hurts. So let's definitely make a change, because enough is enough. It's time for new life. The grassroots, the people who are doing the work in the community is who needs it, who needs the attention, who needs the assistance. Let's not play around politics, and let's keep it equity. Because what we stand for in my organization is equality and prosperity for all, not different divisions and not different classes, not different sides of town and who's who and what's what, is for all.
And thank you again for those words. A question in the chat was, how can we use the young leaders that all of you are working with, whether they be the students in the schools or the ones that you're working with in community? How can we use those to be more part of the transform these dynamics? Maybe pay them as conflict resolution specialists, or some of the things that you are doing. How can we bring them to the forefront? Anyone
You
want
asking
to
me?
address that?
You
I
asking me
think
that?
that's a. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
go ahead. I got
Yeah,
a quick answer
ahead.
for that, brother. We're gonna
Quick
start.
answer.
We're gonna start with what we're doing already, and thanks to the school board and Tricia McManus, that we got a program in the community right now with 4 schools implementing like just mediation. We're there to mentor these kids, and when we start seeing those results and the words keep going out, what we got going on in the planning and the programming that we're going to do, the way that we're helping these kids, the word is going to spread amongst the schools and the community, because that's where we're working as well. Everybody's going to be part of it. So then that's where we say, how can we get these other people involved? Is what it is. Everybody's going to see the truth of what's going on and that it works, and bringing more peace to the community, to the kids, stopping the violence. Who does not going to want to be part of it? And to the school system and to everybody else, somebody said something about this big budget mistake. $16 million is a big number. And there's nothing that could be said but sorry, but that doesn't work. But nobody's going to be here for blame. Let's fix the problem, because it could be doing, because our teachers need it and our kids need it. Our community need it. So let's not point fingers, and let's fix it. Thank you to the school board and to everybody else.
And I just want to echo what my brother said, in terms of that. I think that this embedded mentor program gives us the opportunity to work with our young people, but also to provide them the same training that the mentors are receiving, and to give them a stipend to be a part of it, because peers, they understand each other. They know the language that oftentimes we who are a little older, a little bit grayer, a little bit receding hairlines, we may not understand their language. But we see some wonderful aspect in these young people. And I think that's why the master says, suffer the little children, for such is the kingdom of heaven, because the disciples wanted to dismiss the young people away, but they are truly our future. So I think we have an opportunity to support them. And just going back very quickly, because I know we're ending up, in terms of breaking what I said down in terms of the classism, and we are definitely thankful to Mrs. McManus, our superintendent, because she did something that some institutions would never do in terms of reaching and taking an opportunity on grassroots. And we do feel that our educators and our teachers definitely need to be supported, and that situation needs to be rectified. But who's going to rectify a bigger calculation to where our city spent $2 billion in investment in building up a wonderful downtown, but no money to the east side of Winston? That's a bigger miscalculation that no one has lost their job over.
Ooh, wow.
Again, a very powerful ending to what.
Yeah, I
as
think we can
many-
end on that one.
Yes, we can. I have nothing else to say, except I will call your attention to what has been said in this chat. This is one of the most active chats that we have had in our Faith in the City sessions. And I think that speaks to the truth that our panel members have spoken, the concern that participants have who have been part of Faith in the City. They want to learn. We want to learn. We want to figure out how to do more. And so as we preserve this recording, let me say that we are going to figure out how we can preserve this chat. James, people have asked for your comments, your initial written comments to be publicized. So we want to not just leave this conversation here in this hour today, but this really does give us a lot to think about. So thank you all for your strong truths, and we really appreciate that. And please join me in thanking all our guests today. And Alvin has one thing I know he
Yes.
wants to say. Yes,
Absolutely,
sir.
absolutely. There are things happening in our community by us coming together now, even now. And I was reluctant to even share this with some folks because talk. That's all the time. Well, but this, as I said, we had to hear the truth. There are opportunities now as these organizations with Action for Equity is formulating with my brothers and sisters, Keeper, this whole work moving forward. Winston-Salem Rise is getting its organizational structure to utilize these people who are on the ground doing the work to make it a difference here in Winston-Salem. And it starts one person at a time. That's all it takes. Get it in your heart to do what's right, and then right will be done. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you. And again, this information will be shared, and all of these kind of connections and linkages will be shared through our Faith in the City Facebook page. We have given you information on how to join that. That's becoming a good dialogue and a forum for sharing this information. We also will have the recording available on our Knollwood website. Faith in the City will be back next month, again, going back to the first Tuesday of each month. Tuesday, February the 1st. And in a follow-up discussion, in many ways to our session today, we are going to be focusing on efforts underway to bring restorative practices into the classroom, particularly in response to what students say they really want and need for a safe, healthy school environment. And that really is a continued part of this discussion. So we hope that you will join us next month, February the 1st. And thank you once again for an excellent panel. Great job. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you all.